We're doing the Oath of the Gatewatch constructed review. We're going to be talking a little bit about standard, a little bit more modern, and if we think any card has legacy or vintage potential, we'll pop that up there too, although it's a little bit unlikely. All these cards aren't going to be covered. One of the ones I do want to talk about first, though, is actually Eldrazi Displacer at a 2 and a white for a 3/3. That's not quite where you necessarily want to be to start looking at strong white cards, but exiling another creature and then it coming to battlefield tapped is a fairly strong effect. It can be abusable. I'm not sure if it'll be good enough, but being able to repeatedly flicker things and it taps them, I don't know if that's an advantage or not, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a card to keep your eye on.
It could make it.
It could do interesting things. Flickering can be powerful.
I mean, like in Modern, you could exile your Kitchen Finks, and it comes into play tap, but you gain 2 life, and remove its counter. Probably not worth it.
Not in Modern, but in Standard. In Standard, let's imagine let's imagine you're flickering your Siege Rhino. I
think you have to cast it to get that effect, don't you?
No, it's when it enters the battlefield.
Okay.
There's a lot of enter the battlefield effects, so being able to reuse enter the battlefield effects and be used in an aggressive shell is a nice combo.
Yep.
Call of the Gatewatch is 3 and a white, sorcery. Search your library for a planeswalker, card reveal it, put into your hand. So this makes me think that you can run a lot of different planeswalkers. Like, what does that make you want to run if you put that in a constructed deck?
Just one of a bunch of different planeswalkers that fit in my deck, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention, this is EDH playable.
Well, I mean, we can say that for many cards, but it's especially strong, I think, somewhere in like Standard where you can build a lot of different ones.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you need specifically one for a match.
How do you feel about it in Modern? Do you feel like it's too much?
So I don't think there's any planeswalker that you're going to want to pay to search for. Like,
that's what I was thinking.
I mean, there's no deck based solely around a planeswalker. The one that comes the closest is, I guess, Tron, but Tron doesn't need that.
That's what I figured.
So,
alright.
That will be fun in Standard or EDH, though.
So, I'm not sold on General Tezzeret. I don't think there's an ally deck. But Immolating Glare seems like the kind of card that I'd be happy to play in Standard. I don't think it's exciting, but I do think it'll be in lists.
Yeah, I think it'll be played pretty heavily in basically every control deck.
Yeah. It's just not exciting.
A lot of times, creatures attack alone, so...
I mean, you choose the creature. It's a destroy target attacking creature. It's still not making it Modern, right?
Well... I mean, there's a lot of 2-mana removal, I guess, in Modern, right?
But they don't run Condemn, and that does basically the same thing for 1.
That's true. Yeah, they do gain life with Condemn, but...
yeah, but...
I mean, I don't think you're playing that in Modern.
So how do you feel about Linvala the Preserver? For 4 white, you get a 5/5 Legendary Flying Angel. If your opponent has more life, you gain 5. If they have more creatures, you get a 3/3 Flying Angel. Like...
I don't think it'll make it into Modern, but...
Definitely not.
It's pretty big for Standard. I don't know if it can really compete with Dragons, though, so it's probably going to wait till a cycle.
It is 8 power of flying.
It is 8 power flying. 4, 6 mana.
And it does stabilize you well.
So it's like a white dragon, only it's in 2 creatures instead of 1, which is good and bad.
Yeah.
So it's bad for blocking dragons, good for single target removal.
I like it if there's bigger red decks as well. Like, the life gain means a lot. I don't think it's fast enough for low-to-the-ground red decks, but for maybe more like a mid-range deck or something.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I don't think it'll be a 4 of in any deck.
It might be 1 main board or 1 sideboard. I don't think it's a lot, but...
And once dragons cycle out, maybe to get more play.
Maybe. I think a lot of it does come from the gaining so much. Like, gaining 5 and getting 2 bodies, and all that's really nice.
Yeah.
So... I don't think Cohort, for the most part, is an ability that is usable in Constructed. You have to have 2 allies. One of them has to have been out a whole turn, and then you get an effect. Do you think that's coming around?
Nah, I mean, and let's look at it without the Cohort ability. It's a horrible creature. If it were a decent creature with a Cohort ability, maybe. But I don't think you're playing something that's 5 mana for a 3/3, and you might get to put a counter on everything.
Okay, so we've got the Oaths. The first thing I want to say about the Oaths is that they put a lot of pressure on Jamoka's command. They make enchantments much better, and they all have essentially sorcery effects and then a planeswalker permanent ability. So it doesn't matter that they're legendary, and in fact, them going to the graveyard can be a boon. We have a lot of Delve, so playing your Oath of Gideon until another card, and then having Delve's cards is a big boon. So that's an advantage, not a disadvantage of the enchantments. At 2 and a white, you get 2/1/1 core ally creature tokens. That may be relevant. Each planeswalker you control enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter.
Yeah, and that's cool enough. It might be played in some sort of deck. Maybe an Oath deck will pop up. I think it has more relevance in EDH than anything else, because I really don't know if you're going to want to pay 3 mana for 2/1/1s and then maybe have your next planeswalker enter higher.
Well, I think the thing is, I'm not sure if there are any numbers where the extra loyalty means a lot. Like, okay, let's say we play Oath of Gideon and then -4. You got +1/+1, so you have 2 2/2s, and you have a Gideon left.
I mean, that's cool, but was it worth a card? Probably not.
The question is the 2/1/1s worth the card?
Probably not.
And I'm with you on there. I think that this is probably the worst Oath overall. That saying, this bottom ability, if it becomes relevant, will be very relevant. Let's say we get a Planeswalker who ultimates at 5 and comes in at 4.
Yeah, then it'll be very relevant.
Right. Do you think that there's much merit to support giving all these 1/1 counters? Maybe not specifically Relief Captain, but I think that's the best support card. I don't think it's there.
Wow. Put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 3 target creatures. Other target creatures. So that's a really odd ability, because in order to maximize it, you're going to be playing a lot of low to the ground creatures, and that might be a curve topper. But that's not even enough to really play it. Like,
that's what
it's a cool incidental ability for draft, though. I'm sure you talked about.
Yeah, I talked about the draft stuff. All right, so Searing Light. I think this card will see quite a bit of play. White, instant, destroy target attacking or blocking creature with 2 or less power.
Yeah, I can see that being in a lot of decks.
It really takes the teeth out of a lot of really scary decks staring you down, but also, I think it allows them to print really, really good creatures with 2 power, right? Like,
that's good. Yeah.
You know, imagine a Zergo that whenever it hits you, they draw a card and lose 2 life. Well, that would be a card you'd want to kill. I mean, that card's fictitious, but it's powerful. Let's keep going. There's just not too many. So, let's say that there's good equipment printed. Do you think Stonehaven Outfitter at 1 and a white for 2/2, equipped creature you control get +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature dies, you draw a card. Do you think that that's close enough, or do you think that's just asking too much?
So, it's really good that they're making stuff like this, because, I mean, I guess back in the day in Extended, there was an equipped deck, right? It was like a soldier equipped deck, and that's just not good enough now, and it probably won't ever be good enough, but this is certainly trying. So, I like that this is a flavorful way to continue that trend of having an equipped deck. I don't think it'll ever amount to anything.
I don't think that there's equipment.
It's not like the guy that draws you a card when you play enchantments, and that enables a deck that is boggles.
All right,
it's not like that.
Do you think this will fit into the overall arching theme? Like their modern equipment deck is very close to happening. It's a mono white modern equipment deck. There's powerful equipments. Do you think this would be part of that, or do you think this is too weak of a card?
1/1 for all your equipment.
It's more of the drawing.
Well, so, and it's not worded how I would like it worded. If it said, equipped creatures you control get +1/+1 for each equipment they have, that would be way better. That might make it playable. I don't think how it currently is, it would be worth playing, because you're probably not going to get a card for it, and 1 point of extra damage isn't enough for your 2 mana and your card investment.
I agree. This is an interesting card. 2 and a white for an 0/6 wall defender. When it enters the battlefield, you may put 3/1/1 counters on target land you control. If you do, it becomes a 0/0, so it becomes a 3/3 land with haste. Do you think that that's enough defensive power to consider in sideboards and possibly occasionally main boards for decks to slow down aggro decks? Multiple
So this actually seems like a really good card. At the worst, it is a 3/3 for 3 that is tapped.
And you have an 0/6.
And then you happen to have an 0/6 just lying around the block. And let's not forget that when you play the second one of these, you can make a 6/6.
Yeah, and if you're playing against aggro decks, you can just keep spreading it out and just have multiple.
Yeah, you can have multiple 3/3 blockers. Or if you played, say, 4 of these in your main board and you were a control deck, what aggro deck can beat that?
Yeah.
I mean, that locks down a Siege Rhino. That locks down a lot of stuff in Modern.
Now,
of all things.
Do you think that 3 mana is too much to ask for Modern? In Standard, I definitely think it's playable.
So in Standard, this will be a house. You should probably go buy 4 of these right now if they're not already too expensive. Because these will be played in basically every deck with blue and white in them.
That want to slow down the game.
Yeah.
And they may not be
Which
always...
is every deck that plays blue and white, right?
Yeah, they may not always be main board cards, but it is a 3 mana card to get you quite a bit closer where you need to be.
And you can play it on 3 and just have a 1-tapped creature and 1/06. That's great. This might be good enough for Modern, but probably is not.
Probably is not. We do have in Modern 1 white-blue for a 0/8 hexproof or Shroud, and that doesn't see play.
That's true.
And 4 mana is quite a bit to ask for Modern. Alright, let's go on to the next color. We're going to head over to blue. Alright. So, occasionally weenie decks do pop up with powerful tappers. I do want to mention Blinding Drone is 1 blue for a 1/3 devoid colorless tap target creature. I don't think the colorless is hard to come by.
Not in this set.
No.
Not in drafting or anything.
I don't think in constructed it's an issue either. I don't think it's going to be there, but cards like this tend to be pretty powerful. Blinding Mage saw a small amount of constructed play.
Yeah, I think this is a high pick, but I don't know if it'll make it into a constructed deck. Maybe it will after rotation, though. After rotation, a lot of these 3 and 4 color decks are probably not going to exist.
And that is something else we want to mention.
And that's the more important thing to take away here is that the colorless mana, the waste mana, whatever they're calling it, is way more important once there's a rotation. Because right now, why would I not just play 3 colors or 4 colors?
Right. And you want to think about it from both sides of that. I don't think Deep Fathom Skulker is quite good enough. Dimensional Infiltrator, however, maybe. At 1 in the blue for a 2/1 devoid flash flying. So that already sounds aggressive. You can also pay 1 in the colorless. Your opponent exiles the top card of the library. If it's a land, you may return it to its owner's hand, so it has like bad protection from itself.
That's a weird card.
There have been plenty of times where 2/1 flyers have seen play in Standard as beat down aggressive decks, and there's a lot of aggressive flyers.
Yeah.
I think actually, when we get to black, you'll see more of them. I think blue-black kind of Skies aggro may become a deck. There's not a lot of anti-flying tech, and cards like Dimensional Infiltrator and a couple other ones we see, and a couple others that already exist might help push that. So how do you feel about Void Shatter?
Void Shatter. Counter target spell. If that spell is countered this well, exile it instead of putting it in its owner's graveyard. So, I really like this. What does it take the place of in Modern, though?
This is Dissipate.
It's just...
Colorless Dissipate.
Do they play Dissipate?
They don't in Modern.
Okay.
But in Standard, how do you feel
Standard, yes.
You'll play Colorless Dissipate?
Yeah, I'll play Colorless Dissipate. The other one that is better than Dissipate has already cycled, right? The one that lets you scry 1? That one's already cycled out,
yes.
Right? Okay.
And Dissipate can be better if we have cards that care about exiled cards. Like, this makes processing cards better.
Oh, yeah, so that's great for any control deck in Standard because it exiles you a card.
So, tell us about comparative analysis and how you feel about that.
So, target player draws 2 cards, but if you cast it for its surge cost, you can cast it for 3. So, the closest example, I guess, of this is the sorcery speed one, draw 2 cards, right?
Right. Okay, so Surge is if you cast another spell, it costs less and sometimes does more. Let's first talk about this in Standard. Realistically, we will always be paying 1 mana or more. We don't have free cards worth playing.
No. Now, in Modern, the value of this goes up because there's a lot of spells that you can play for free or pay for with life. So
I don't think it's good enough. Then.
I don't think it's good enough, but it's very close. I don't think it could ever make it in Storm because there's too many good Storm cards.
Yeah, and they can just play the 3 mana version all the time. So let's look at a Surge card that may be a little bit better. As awkward as it is, Containment Breach is 2 and a blue. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, but you can Surge it for just a single blue. Now, in Standard, that is a really powerful way to get caught up with a control deck. I think Surge is very good for control decks that way. What about What about Modern when I play my free spell and I just tap down their guy permanently for blue? Does that seem playable?
So, it doesn't tap the creature, it just keeps it from untapping. So you will get hit by it once.
But in Modern, there's
But
no
in Modern, there's no, yeah.
So let's say you're playing a blue-based deck. Let's say you're playing Blue Tron or one of the many other blue decks. Most of them have multiple spells. You play a Ponder in this.
Yeah.
You play a Gitaxian Probe in this. Is that good enough, or would you not want?
I'm not sure what you're taking out of those decks to put this.
This is your removal. This is your conditional removal. But your blue deck before didn't have conditional removal.
That's true.
For 1 mana. This is your 1 mana conditional removal spell. We haven't had one of those.
It might make it into a sideboard. The problem is I don't know what they're taking out to put it in the sideboard.
Okay. But
it does fill a niche that didn't previously have a card, though.
That's what I thought was kind of cool.
So,
all right, so we've got Crush of Tentacles here. 4 blue, Surge for 3 blue. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. If Crush of Tentacles Surge cost was played, put an 8/8 onto the field. Now, the first thing I want to say, you can kill an 8/8. The second thing I want to say is, you better kill that 8/8.
Yeah. So this probably isn't good enough for Modern because there's too much just removal.
Even at 5, it's just too much.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes out of a sideboard in your Tron, whatever, but probably not.
But for Standard, this will make a great control deck card.
Right. Now, for Standard, this is probably going to want to go with either black, green, or red, and I'll talk more about that why. It's because they have good white mana cards.
So right now, you could theoretically, at 6 mana, Thought Seize them, take whatever answer they have, and then play
duress them. But yeah,
and then play or duress them.
Well, we have Thought Seize in Standard.
Oh, it's already cycled out. My bad. So you could duress them and then take this.
Yeah,
play this,
which is powerful, and they have to answer your 8/8 because if I duress you, take your removal spell, play my 8/8. You need to play creatures. You need to answer the 8/8.
Well, not to mention you just put all their creatures in their hand, so they no longer can block this 8/8.
Correct.
So,
I don't think so. Gift of Tusks. We've seen this effect before. It doesn't always get played, but it's blue instant. Until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities, becomes a 3/3 green elephant. I kind of like the fact that it's a little bit better with Awaken, but I don't think Awaken is playable. So I don't think this is playable, but it is an important thing to mention that if Awaken becomes playable, this becomes a better card.
Yeah, because you could Awaken your own creature, and then you could Gifted Tusk it, so it's a 3/3 with now the tokens on it, and then you can attack with it, and then it just becomes a token creature again.
And that's the secondary use. The primary use in that deck is you're obviously playing another color, and now you can Gift of Tusk their Ulamog or the Kozilek.
Yeah. There aren't many cards that do that in blue. Most of them destroy the creature, and since they're indestructible creatures now, that's a good twist on this card.
So Grip of Royal I don't think is particularly great. It's 2 and a blue, tap target creature, it doesn't untap, draw a card. It surges for 2. I think that's below rate. I just wanted to mention it because it might pop up as a way to slow things down. I'm not sold on it. But tell us about Hedron alignment.
Hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may reveal your hand. If you do, you win the game if you have Hedron alignment in exile, hand, graveyard, and battlefield. So you've got 4 copies. The one you've played, the one in your hand, the one that you've previously exiled, and you've got one that somehow died even though it's hexproof or been discarded. That does not seem like a card that will ever get played in a serious deck.
Well, the good news is it has hexproof, and it does scry.
That's the good news and the bad news, though. You can't just have one of these destroyed and play another one.
Well, you have to have it. I don't think this is a playable deck. I will say, in favor of it, if you have ways to get it to your graveyard, you can delve one out. That's the easy part. I think the hardest part is just getting 4 of them. Imagine if it said you could play any number of these. I think that would be reasonable.
Well, what if it also said you only had to have 3 of the 4?
That would also be there.
But I mean, this seems so hard to set up. Why would you even try to do any of this?
Yeah. Do you think you can build a legacy deck that uses intuition with it?
So intuition would get you
3
the one in your hand and the other 2 in your graveyard.
And then you can delve one away.
And so you would still need one in play. But you could cast a second intuition, and that would go to your
You could
graveyard
just play
as
a copy enchantment. There's ways to make them. No, that's not good. It's just
Oh,
really silly.
man.
What about for EDH, though?
Yes, that would work very well in EDH if you could play 4 copies
All
of
right.
EDH and wanted to do that and nothing else.
So let's talk about a search card that's exciting-ish.
It's so exciting it yawns.
Yeah, Jawar Isle Avenger.
It's a creature that surges, which I think is a really really cool thing, because decks that are already playing creatures would love to play more creatures for cheaper.
So let's imagine that we do find some way to play something for 1 or for very cheap, and we can play this essentially as a 2 mana, 2 blue for a 3/3 flying. Do you think 2 blue 3/3 flying is good enough for standard?
So we're playing a card that will make this 1 cheaper, in addition to
2 cheaper.
2 cheap.
Oh,
That's still 3 mana though. So
if we play a Bonesaw, it's free or something.
Oh, okay. So we want to play this for 3 mana after playing something that's 1 mana
Or free.
or free.
So we play this
In
on turn
standard, that would be great. I just can't think of anything in standard that you'd really want to play.
Yeah,
like that.
Bonesaw is the only free card I want to play that.
Okay.
Alright, now let's say it's modern, where the free cards are better. Do you think a free card with a 3 mana 3/3 flying is good?
No, probably not worth the card.
Okay.
I mean, it would eventually win the game if your opponent didn't do anything, but a lot of cards in Modern will win the game on their own for 3 mana. So,
Alright.
Or you've built your entire deck around them, or something like that. This is just an incidentally good card. So,
Isaac was pointing out that we could Drumlicus command and sacrifice our Eternal Alignment. But, so Negate is...
that's a better plan than I had.
Sure. Negate is,
I'm glad they're reprinting it.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's a very cool picture.
And it'll make sure that Standard has good answers. Alright, Oath of Jace. 2 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3, discard 2. So you essentially saw 3 new cards, and you're not down any cards. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry X, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. So you get to scry every turn. And you only scry 1 at first, but you could easily get to a position where you're scrying 2 or 3, which is very close to powerful effects.
So I wish they would have went ahead and pushed this card and said at the beginning of every upkeep, giving it to you. Because that, to me, doesn't seem powerful enough to play in even EDH.
I think you're underestimating it. And so the biggest thing for me here is when you play your Oath of Jace,
You replace it so it didn't cost you a card.
and
You dig 3.
and you put 2 cards in your graveyard for your Delve decks.
That's true, but then the card almost does nothing. Like, Scry 1 every turn is good, but...
Okay, what about Scry 2 every turn?
Scry 2 every turn is really good, but if you've got 2 Planeswalkers in play, you should be winning anyway. You don't need this.
Okay, well, what if you play turn 2 Jace, and then turn 3 other guy, and then your turn 2 Jace into your Oath of Jace? How close are you to flipping now? Let's say you played a fetch
You are
land,
very close to flipping.
your Jace, and your Oath of Jace. And these are all cards you're going to be playing. You probably only play 2 Oath of Jace, but you're probably playing 4 Jace, a couple of Oath of Jaces, and you're probably playing another card. So maybe turn 4, or Oath of Jace flips your Jace, you scry 1, then you play your Planeswalker. Like, I think it's easier to get more Planeswalkers with the Oaths.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but I mean, is it worth a card that, if you're behind, does almost nothing? Like just draws you cards, like...
I don't know. Maybe that's why you're only running 1 or 2.
Yeah. I don't know if it's worth playing, but it'll probably make its way into some deck in Standard. I don't think it's good enough for Modern.
No. Overwhelming Denial. 2 blue, instant. Overwhelming Denial can't be countered by spells or abilities. Counter target spell. Surge blue.
That's really cool. I don't really know if you're going to want to play this, though. You might play it in Standard, but I don't think you're going to play it in anything else.
I think you're only playing this in Control Mirrors, where countering for less means more because you're playing more instants.
Yeah.
I think it's very good there.
Yeah. I'm glad they printed a card like that. The fact that it's double blue, no matter what, though, means I don't think it can make it to Modern. If it were 1 and a blue, it probably could make it to Modern.
Tell us about the Sphinx.
Sphinx of the Final Word. It cannot be countered. It has flying and hexproof. Instants and sorcery spells you control can't be countered by spells or abilities. That seems awesome for EDH, but not
it's
for else.
7. It's 5 blue for a 5/5. So let's say we get to Standard and it's real grindy. How many of these would you put in your sideboard? You can sideboard.
Grindy sideboard?
Like 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you might even play 2.
Yeah, you mean there could be a...
if they have wraths, you know.
You mean you can counter their stuff, they can't counter your stuff.
That's a good point. It does have basically the Teferi clause.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically out of playing that stuff there. I think that's it for blue. Let's head on over to black. Alright, so this is the other flyer I was talking about. Bearer of Silence, which is odd because there's no bears on it. 1 in the black for a 2/1. Devoid flying. Bearer of Silence can't block. When you cast it, you may pay 1 in colorless. If you do, target opponent sacrifices a creature. So let's imagine we have this blue-black kind of aggro deck, and it has little flyers with flash and counter spells and discard and cards like this. You know, when we get to the colorless cards, I'm actually imagining this deck is actually a blue-black colorless deck playing some powerless and colorless. Can you kind of see this kind of aggro control deck somewhere coming together?
I think that would be a good deck post-rotation where you lose all these colors.
Right. I do think it's post-rotation for many of them because we don't have many blue-black cards.
You just jam a bunch of flyers and hope that their removal is poor enough that they're 1-for-1ing you. So that they're killing a 2/1 flyer with a 3-mana removal spell, and you're just punching them in the face with little flyers repeatedly until they die from it.
Yep. All right. Let's
that seems like a great post-rotation deck.
Flaying Tendrils, 1 black, devoid. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead.
So it's an infest that exiles. I like it.
I will say that this is going to be a major crimp in the rally decks, which depend on their creatures dying, and this exiles them. This may be a extremely strong tool against them to prevent their sort of strength.
Now, this also seems like it might be useful in Modern. Like, exiling Kitchen Finks matters a lot.
Yeah.
This also kills Malira and exiles it. Let's see, what else does it kill? It could theoretically kill Tormagorth, probably not. What else? Can you think of anything other?
It kills most of the creatures. I mean, the thing about it is...
It kills most of the creatures that persist is another thing that I'm getting at.
And it does. It's very good against the... a lot of decks that care about recursion and stuff like that. Just exiling them all is a powerful effect. I think that this will be the black 3-mana removal of choice.
Yeah, I mean, Infest and the one that Scry's one doesn't really get played, right?
They do a little bit, and they are fine, but I think that the real thing about it is, I think you'd play Flaying Tendrils even over like a black -3/-3 card because
the exile.
The exile is so good in Modern.
Yeah, and so exile matters a whole lot in Modern, where a lot of things come right back.
So tell us about Inverter of Truth.
Inverter Truth, 4 mana, flying, devoid. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library face down, then shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. Okay.
It's a 6/6.
So,
So I wanted to mention 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 is we're playing in Standard, and it's a controlling-ish deck. Let's say it's blue-black or black-white, and about 13 or 14 cards in your graveyard. You've delved out some of the cards you don't want, so it's just good cards you want, and you play this card. And your deck is now 13 powerful cards.
That seems like a great finisher.
Okay, now...
Because not only does it set you up to finish it from your library, you still have the rest of your hand, which is probably not very much, if you've been playing back and forth for that many turns. But you've also got a 6/6 flyer they have to deal with.
Right. Okay, so in Modern, this is a little trickier. I'm not sure if it'll see play or not, but being able to choose what cards are left in your library is a powerful effect. We see cards like Doomsday, which are better than this card, but Doomsday is an entire legacy deck just because of that.
And it doesn't get attached to a 6/6 flyer either.
That's correct, but you do have a lot more work to do with Inverter of Truth. You have to sculpt your graveyard.
Yeah, and that's a lot easier now that they've made so many cards that let you delve.
Right, you have Tasigur and Dromag Angler in Modern, and in Standard, you also have access to the blue ones, which are very powerful. I'm not sure if Inverter of Truth is playable in Legacy, but there may be something we're missing that makes it much better than it is. I don't think it's a great card. I don't think it'll definitely have a home. It's just a strong and interesting effect. Keep your eye on it. Maybe you could be the one that makes it work. Not us. We're not going to do that.
No. I will definitely play that fun deck, though, if it gets handed to me.
So, Sifter of Skulls is 3 black for a 4/3 devoid. Whenever another non-creature token dies, put a 1/1 Scion to play that sacks for mana. So let's say I'm playing my beatdown deck. It is 2 or 3, whatever colors it is. Maybe it's Abzan. I drop it and I swing with all my creatures. Is that good enough? Is whenever my creatures die, getting a 1/1 is everything but Wrath protection good?
Based on... Well, so isn't this effect in play when your creatures all die at once, so you get all the tokens from not this?
Yes.
When someone wraths? Okay, so you do get something if somebody wraths.
Yeah, if I have this and 3 other non-token creatures, then I get 3 1/1s.
Okay. So, I don't think this is playable based on the other card that hardly anybody played, the one that let you scry 1 every time a creature died.
Are you talking about Reaper of the Wilds?
Yeah, Reaper
that
of
card
the
saw
Wilds.
some play before rotation.
It saw a little bit of play, but not much. And it was a beast of a card to try to kill, because it had Regenerate.
Right, this one gives you bodies instead of scries.
Yeah, and bodies are better than scries, probably.
Definitely.
But I don't see it being powerful enough to be super expensive.
Okay.
It'll probably get played, just not much.
So let's talk about Unnatural Endurance. For black, target creature gets +2/+0 and regenerates. Like, that's a very cheap way to regenerate in power. Not sure if it's going to be good enough for standard, but it is the kind of card that can pop up in sideboards from time to time for just being cheap and efficient enough.
Yeah, I think at some point it'll see some play, and the first time it sees play, it's really going to shock somebody. Like, they're going to lose a very good combat to it.
So Visions of Brutality is not a particularly playable card. At 1 black, enchantment devoid. Enchanted creature can't block. Whenever it deals damage, its controller loses that much life. But it is a fun card to imagine putting on a certain little Eidolon in Modern. Because it will do double the damage to the opponent. Oh, this is a bad card. Don't do that. Don't do that. But it's funny. It's funny to say that, though, right?
Okay. Let's hope everybody didn't know what you were talking about.
All right, Modern. They're not Modern. Standard. Grasp of Darkness is reprinted. Black, -4/-4. How do you feel about that?
What set was that originally from?
It's been a minute.
That'll get played a lot in Standard.
Yeah, this is very.
That'll get played especially after rotation where you don't have all these colors.
So let's say
that is great removal.
Grasp of Darkness is another card that I think pushes us towards the mono black deck. Speaking of, Colorless, Trader of Get. 2 black, 3/4, lifelink, legendary creature, vampire warrior. If a non-creature token an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card, and you get a 2/2 black zombie creature.
Yeah, and then you can sacrifice a vampire or a zombie and put 2 counters on the Trader of Get.
I think that this is a very strong card. I think this is maybe the black cards we're seeing to push us into mono black the deck, right? We had Drana,
which I don't know if mono black the deck can ever happen without the perfect storm where it happened last time, but everyone always hopes for it, and I hope for it too.
Mono black has been a deck before, and we have cards like Grasp of Darkness, Colorless, Drana. Like, we have excellent 1-drops, 3-drops, and 4-drops now to go with it. And there's a couple of good 2-drops we've seen around as well.
2 mana removal is very hard to come by. So.
And instant speed is so powerful. This is a strong card. Could you play one in Modern, or would you just rather play Afinza if you were looking for this kind of effect to stop your opponent from having creatures enter the graveyard?
So at 4 mana for Modern, that is too much to stop a graveyard.
That's what I figured.
So you either need to ley line, and nobody hardly plays that, or you need to play the Relic of Progenitus and just be able to nix the graveyard for 1 mana, and you draw the card.
Do you want to tell us about the Obligator?
So the Obligator obligates the eldrazi to do stuff. In this case, he when you cast him, you may pay 1 in a colorless, and if you do, gain control of target creature until end of turn. So you what is the word?
Active treason.
Active treason them, and it gains haste. And so this guy also has haste. So for 5 mana, you get to active treason and get a 3/1. That seems really good.
So we know this is good enough in Standard. First and foremost,
definitely.
3
active treason is a great card anyway.
For 2 and a red for a 3/1 is good enough in Standard. What I want to ask you is, could this be good enough in Modern, especially when we saw the Eldrazi Temple-based decks, which make this 5 mana card maybe a turn 3 play or something?
So
imagine if you paid.
I think it is a turn 3 play because you could play the Eldrazi Monument, Eldrazi, that gives you 2 mana for Eldrazi, and then the 1 red mana of any direction, and then you steal one of their cards, but you don't have to do it on 3 because they're not going to have very many things on 3. You can just...
They might. They could have a Tarmogoyf.
They could have a Tarmogoyf. It's probably not very big that early in the game, though. So this seems like it's good at any point in the curve, though, is what's important for that deck. You don't necessarily need it on turn 3 for it to be good, and it gets better the more they think they've stabilized with a creature.
So one of the things we're talking about is in Modern right now, there's the Eldrazi Black-White deck, which I think is getting a giant boon. I think it's going from a deck you probably shouldn't be playing to a deck you should definitely get on your radar because the Eldrazi coming out are very powerful in this set. And we're going to see different variants other than just Black-White Eldrazi. They make the Eldrazi essentially cost 2 less per.
Yeah, and I mean, we should pull up that deck very quickly because this is a deck that most of the cards are in Standard, right?
Yes.
And so that means they're kind of accessible if you wanted to trade for them. And so it's still got some fetches and stuff in it they're kind of expensive. But for the most part...
so Wasteland Strangler is a card they're going to be keeping in it. But you could see yourself not... Maybe you are, maybe you aren't playing a card like Blighter or Oblivion Silver. Maybe you're upgrading these cards. Maybe you're not.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. Look at how cheap the deck is, though, to build right now. And most of those cards you could trade for because they're in Standard. And so, them printing more cards to make this deck better is really good for people getting into Modern. They could build this deck as opposed to build decks that they can't trade for the cards because nobody has them.
Yep.
Like, anybody that plays Standard will have some of those cards.
So, let's keep going. Alright, so Kozilek's Return is 2 and a red, instant, devoid. It deals 2 damage to each creature. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi creature spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, you may exile it from your graveyard. May. If you do, it deals 5 damage to each creature. This is obviously standard playable. This will obviously make... We have many, many good aggressive cards printed, and this is one of the cards to keep it in check. I don't want to know about the fact that there is going to be red, or, you know, you don't even have to play red. There's going to be control decks running this in Standard. What about Modern?
So...
Is it playable in Tron?
It's weird because in order to get any benefit from it, you have to cast an Eldrazi spell of 7 mana or greater, and I don't know that they cast any Eldrazi spells.
They would cast a miracle. They could cast other ones. Let's say they think it's worth it, and they're going to put some Eldrazi in. There's a lot of Eldrazi to run. Let's say that the red-based Eldrazi ramp deck, the one we saw before, maybe it's a deck that casts more things like Kozilek's Return.
Oh, so the red-based, or a red version of the Eldrazi deck we were talking about could play this, and it would be very good. I don't think that Tron would bother playing this. I don't think they're going to want to cast any Eldrazi over what they already cast.
I know some versions have run.
So they have 1 Ulamog currently, and 1 Emrakul.
So what if they had dropped 1 Worm Coil and played another 7 mana or 8 mana decent one, so they could essentially run? Do you think it's not worth it because of the 1 more mana? That Pyroclasm is just that much better?
Yeah, so Pyroclasm at 2 is very important to them because they might die before turn 3 to some of their matches, but Pyroclasm against Affinity is what wrecks Affinity if they cast it second or third turn. If Affinity gets a lightning fast start, that second time Pyroclasm can keep them from dying. Right. Whereas a third turn might not. Okay. So, but the Eldrazi based deck might be able to use this to greater effect than Pyroclasm.
Because they can cast turn 2.
Yeah. Or I mean, they might just use Pyroclasm too, though, is the thing.
Alright, let's talk about Chandra Flamecaller.
Alright, so at 6 mana, it's probably not making it into anything but Standard and EDH. However, for Standard, the +1 ability of putting 2 three ones that immediately die at the end step, so they must attack, basically.
That's +1 6 damage.
Yeah, that's +1 6 if you can get it through.
But it's across 2 bodies. I mean, like, how often do you have that many extra creatures to block instant? How often the Standard board's thick, you know what I'm saying?
That's true. That's a very good finisher for a big red deck. The discard all the cards in your hand and draw that many cards +1 is actually really good. 2 for red decks. And then any ultimate should kill the opponent. It looks like it just wrecks all their creatures on the board.
So
because you wouldn't do it for enough to kill Chandra,
well,
probably.
She doesn't really have an ultimate. She actually just has 3 usable abilities. And Chandra can go in other decks because she's 4 red. She's not low-end red. Let's say she's in a Grixis deck.
Yeah, she's not just 2 red. She's 4 mana and then 2 red, so you'll have time to get there.
And the +1, there's 2 situations. Your opponent has multiple small creatures and you're attacking them. They are probably trying to stop some of that mana. You're trading. Your opponent has a big creature and you're using that ability. You're probably doing 3 to 6 damage to a planeswalker and or to them.
Mm-hmm.
The third option is your opponent has multiple big creatures, in which case you may need to use your minus ability. Well, maybe they're multiple siege rhinos. You're in a rough spot. Fortunately, Chandra comes with the ability to turn all the cards that aren't answering multiple siege rhinos into cards that might be able to.
Mm-hmm. So I think she's good at all points of your red playstyle, which is good enough to get her into standard. At 6 mana, though, she won't make it in any other format.
No, she's probably a 1 or 2 of in decks, but she is a fearsome card to see.
Excellent picture, by the way.
Yeah. So, Embodiment of Fury is an interesting card. It's 3 in a red for 4/3 trample. Land creatures you control have trample, which doesn't look that good at first until you think about it as a top-end red card. Where you turn 4, or let's say turn 5, I play this card, and then I play a fetch land, and I give that fetch land +3/+3, and I attack for 3. And then the next turn comes, and I play a fetch land, and now I have a 3/3. I crack 2 fetch lands. I have 3 3/3s, and I attack with my 9 damage of lands and 4 damage of creatures. Yeah, and that was 1 creature.
Yeah, and so that seems like it could actually get into Modern, because Modern already plays fetch lands. It already has decks that are okay with playing 4 mana for a really awesome effect. And as a mono red, doesn't it have kind of a problem finishing some games?
It could.
Whereas that gives them a lot of reach.
It does. I think in Standard, this will see play at the top of red decks.
A lot of play in Standard.
I think in Modern...
And look at that. That's an uncommon.
It is. It seems...
That is so good for an uncommon.
Yeah.
That looks like a rare.
It'll play like a rare, too. It's very pushed. The good news is, in Limited, they can do that because there's no fetch lands. So in Limited, you... First of all, you get a basically attack with a 3/3 and a 4/3. That's really strong. Mm-hmm. But, in Constructed, you have, like I just set up, and it's not a dream scenario to say you're going to have this card and 2 fetch lands. How often do you have a card and 2 fetch lands?
Yeah, you might not fetch some, but not fetching some means you have drawn a ton of lands, which is really bad for you.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Tell us about Fall of the Titans.
Fall of the Titans, Surge for X in a red, whereas it normally costs double X in a red. That's a huge discount. Deals X damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or players. So this is basically what is the fireball that you can pay 1 more to split it? Is it Comet Storm? I don't remember.
Something like that. There's no version quite like this.
So there's never been something exactly like this. But this is a great fireball. The weirdest part about this card is since it's X and a red, that means you've already cast some sort of spell, which means your X is lower now. So it doesn't seem great, but it does seem standard playable.
So in Modern, if this is always free for 1 X, deal X damage to up to 2 targets, is that good enough?
How often do you care about 2 targets in Modern?
If you're trying to kill 2 creatures, but the thing about it is, to do 1 damage to 2 creatures, you have to pay 2. To do 2 damage to 2 creatures, you have to pay 3. To do 3 damage to 2 creatures, you have to pay 4. That doesn't seem to scale well for me.
No, so I don't think it's good enough for Modern.
That's what I think
it is good enough for Standard.
You want to tell us about the Dark Dwellers?
Goblin Dark Dwellers, they have Menace, which means they can't be blocked except by 2 creatures. When it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card will be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So this also seems like a great finisher card for Standard. Menace is very hard to block. Very menacing if you... No, I'm not going to do that. So 5 mana for a 4/4 is... a little bit under having Menace puts it pretty much on par, but then casting a spell or converting mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard could be any number of things, right? I mean, mostly you're just going to put removal in
and
there.
discard. Okay.
Yeah.
So
at 5, they're probably not going to have much to discard.
maybe not. I don't think it's the greatest in standard. It might see some play. Like in the top of a red burn deck, if there's a 3-mana burn spell that's potentially potent. What do you
like a
think?
very potent 3-mana burn spell.
Like it would be fine. Like Exquisite Firecrest, it does 4. That's nice.
Yeah.
What do you think about using its effect on suspend cards? Because their converted mana cost is less than 3. Do you think paying 5 is too much to be able to instantly cast any of your suspend cards out of your graveyard in Modern?
Suspend cards and graveyard. So, what one did you have in mind? Because I can't think of anything but
Hypergenesis
Rift Bolt.
I'm talking specifically about the Living End type cards.
Oh, so all the ones that are basically free and you have to suspend them.
Yes.
Huh.
I don't think it's good enough, but it does cast them.
So, there aren't very many of them you'd want to cast. The Hypergenesis deck tries to go off before 5, right?
Hypergenesis is banned.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
That's why no one plays it.
I don't think it's there, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
Why is that? It's not even that good.
Alright, Oath of Chandra. It's because Hypergenesis is really good. But it's 1 in a red, and when it enters the battlefield, it does 3 damage to target creature and opponent controls.
That's pretty good. At the beginning of each end step, if a planeswalker enters the battlefield under your control this turn, it deals 2 damage to each opponent.
It's the worst ability on the second part, except it kills the other planeswalkers. It's the best in the mirror. But the first ability is bad, then, because they probably don't have that many creatures, which is an interesting kind of duality before it. I think that the first ability is very strong, though, in protecting your other creatures. Other planeswalkers. Do you think if you're playing a planeswalker
So
deck...
this seems like the worst one. Like, if a planeswalker entered...
I mean the first ability.
Under your opponent... That second ability is basically useless. I mean, it might happen every once in a while. Right, it's going to happen once per planeswalker, maybe.
Yes.
Not every turn, like the rest of them.
That is correct.
And then the 3 damage to target creature and opponent controls is a really bad...
It's actually really
burn
good.
spell, right?
It's a good burn spell.
It's a good burn spell?
That's more than we normally get at 2 mana now.
I guess you're right, and it's only to creatures, though.
Right, but the fact that it doesn't play well together. Usually only one of the 2 abilities is good. It's the best when your opponent has creatures and has planeswalkers. Other the times, I'm not that impressed. So, it's interesting in that this first ability, I think, is one of the better first abilities as far as defending your planeswalkers goes, but that the second ability is just not really that great. Can you tell us about Pyromancer's Assault?
So, 4 mana. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player.
Now, if there's a deck that always casts 2 spells a turn, would you play this card?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the problem is it costs a little too much to be playing in anything but standard.
It is only for standards.
4 mana is a lot of mana, even for standard, for something that you have to then cast 2 spells a turn.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
But I don't think you can ever consistently cast 2 spells a turn in standard.
There are tools for this to succeed. We'll get to the rest of them, but it's essentially going to be a blue-red surge deck that casts 2 spells every turn.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It is a strong effect, and if you do get to throw 2 damage around it over and over, it's nice. The problem is it mostly going to players? I mean, like, you can't wait till turn 4 or 5 to kill their first creature or 2. So, Reckless Bushwhacker is 2 and a red for 2/1 haste. Surge, 1 and a red. If you pay the surge cost, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste. So, this is obviously standard playable. There will be a standard deck that takes advantage of the fact that this card is awesome. Modern. Is this pushing to modern levels?
This might be pushing to modern levels. There's another deck that I've played in modern that plays that other goblin does the similar effect.
For red.
Yeah, it does the same thing for red, right?
Yes.
Okay, because it's red and kicker red, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So, this definitely goes in that random deck that's not tier 1. But
do 4 Goblin Bushwhackers make that tier 1? Because they can play stuff very easily. They're not usually playing Goblin Bushwhacker as the only card there. They're usually playing multiple cards that turn.
I think it makes it a deck that I would like to own, because it seems like a deck that would be good to hand somebody who wanted to go to a Modern event.
Okay.
I think it's capable of winning, but not tier 1.
So you think
tier 2?
It helps push it.
It helps push it to playable, at least. Maybe not tier 1. That's something I want to see played.
Alright, Tears of Valakut, 1 in red. It can't be countered by spells or abilities. It's an instant, deals 5 damage to target creature with flying. So, this is a very strong plummet variant. It's here to kill something, and I'm not sure what we're supposed to be killing with it right now.
But maybe card right next to it, apparently.
No. But do you think that this is... Do you think there's any card in Modern with flying that has to die?
Not that you wouldn't kill with something else, I think.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the other card they printed that can't be countered and does 4 damage to something, right?
Yep.
And you would rather play that.
I agree.
Most times.
I've got a green to finish up the colors here. Tell us about World Breaker.
World Breaker, 6 and a green to void. When you cast it, exile target artifact, enchantment, or land. It has reach, and you can pay 2 and a colorless, sacrifice a land. Return World Breaker from your graveyard to your hand.
Seems like a good control finisher or a good ramp finisher.
It's weird because it only gets artifacts, enchantments, and lands. It doesn't get planeswalkers. It doesn't get, it doesn't get creatures, but it's a 5/7, so that'll probably get the creature.
And it has reach, it stabilizes the board well, and it's a 5/7, so it can swing into those creatures pretty well.
And it can't die very easily. Not to mention, so it has protection built in, and you can always just sacrifice a land, return it to your hand, and cast it again if you wanted.
Yeah.
It's really cool for EDH, but I don't think it's good enough to play in anything.
I think it's good enough for Standard. I think when you're the ramp deck and you're the first person to ramp in this, the other ramp deck is probably going to lose.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what artifacts and enchantments must die.
You just get rid of their lands.
Yeah, lands are fine to get rid of. Then you're getting rid of one of your lands to get one of their lands again. That's pretty cool.
Right, well, they also had to answer your 5/7 to do that, so they spent another card.
Yeah, or you just attack them and then return it and cast it again if you have that much mana. So, it's a slow death right there.
Yeah, so I think it is a card that's going to be seeing some play. It's very resilient, and it is a 2-for-1 every time. Vile Redeemer is 2 and a green for a 3/3, the Void Flash Eldrazi. When you cast it, you may pay colorless. If you do, you put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion into play for each non-creature token that died this turn. So this is
under your control.
Under your control. This is a Wrath replacement card, but I do think that just being 3/3 for 3 with Flash brings a decent bit up to that, and that you can pay 4 to get all your creatures back. I'm not sure if it's good enough, but sometimes these cards get pushed over into Standard.
Yeah. So they print these cards every once in a while. There's the Elf one, right? That makes 2/2s when your elves die. Actually, it might just say creatures.
It says creatures.
Elves. And then there's another one that they printed a few years ago that makes...
There's one that makes bears.
Bears, right?
Yep.
Maybe I've got those in reverse. The one that makes the elves is actually newer than the other one. Alright, anyway, but both of those don't require you to pay an extra 1.
That is true. This one is bigger than the other ones, too. It has a more
relevant bigger, and it makes creatures that can sack for mana.
But they're smaller creatures.
Yeah. So, it's neat.
Tell us about Bonds of Mortality, and if you think it's a good sideboard card.
Alright, so it's 1 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So it replaces itself. Pay a green, creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. It seems like a great EDH card, but I don't think...
lets you answer Ulamog's and other hexproof cards.
It does let you answer Ulamog.
This is a sideboard card. It replaces itself as well. I could see it being played in various versions of Standard. I don't know. I think it's too slow for Modern, right? For sure.
What is hexproof and indestructible in Modern that matters?
Boggles.
That's true, but there's already that other card that just they lose hexproof, right? It's like 1 mana. It's colorless.
Yeah, the light, but it doesn't draw you a card.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't draw you a card.
I don't.
I mean, nobody ever plays that for Boggles anyway, so nobody probably.
Nobody sideboards for Boggles.
Yeah, you're gonna lose to Boggles if you lose.
All right, so we've got Nissa.
So I don't particularly like Nissa for Modern or Legacy, because I guess specifically for Modern because she's just not good enough for Legacy. She doesn't really fit into any deck that exists, and we've talked about this before. I can play her in my token deck, but then I'm warping my token deck to be very green, whereas right now it's black-white. I can build a deck completely around her, right? So it plays a lot of low mana creatures that really want counters, but the problem with all that is, why am I doing any of that when I could just play better creatures?
So what it comes down to in Modern is that green, black, and white are the token colors. And right now, black and white are the best token colors.
Yep, and there's no point in putting green in there.
And you have to figure out at what point do cards like Nissa tip that to be, is it Abzan, is it green-white, or is it green-black?
Yeah. And so here's another thing. She could go into just the green-white deck, right? But what are you taking out to put her in? You're probably taking out another Planeswalker, right? Or you're taking out a really good creature? And she's just not that great.
Yeah, you have to figure out where she wants to be at.
Yeah.
She's down right now.
Yeah, there's no telling. It was just loading.
Alright, so let's get to what I think is probably the best card in the set. Oath of Nissa. Green, legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature, land, or planeswalker from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. You may spend mana, as though it were any mana of any color, to cast planeswalker spells. The second ability is good. It helps you kind of maneuver this multicolored deck. You don't have to be overly greedy with it. The reason this is the best one is, let's say that your deck runs 20 non-creature or non-permanent spells, right? You've got 40 cards that are either creatures, lands, or planeswalkers, and 20 cards that are not that filled. The math on it is basically 98% to hit. That's with 20 non-creature, non-land, non-planeswalker cards. If you're playing the planeswalker deck, you're probably playing quite a few. So Oath of Nissa basically always hits. Early game, it fixes your mana. And then later, it starts getting you the things you want. You don't mind playing them into each other. It protects the enchantments you want to protect. It's giving you filtering. If you have a card, like we talked about, the Surge of Tentacles, you play Oath of Nissa, you draw your card, you play your Surge of Tentacles, you get your 8/8, the next turn you play your Oath of Nissa again, you get another card. It does a lot of little things, and the fact that it does so much at one makes me think that it is probably just the best card for that. Like, there's not currently a really big Super Friends deck in Modern.
Mm-mm.
But when your deck starts at 1, it's a lot better, right?
Yeah, and, I mean, Super Friends... I mean, we could start throwing the deck together. You would probably play... Well, you would obviously play green for this card. And for Mana Wrap, maybe? Not sure.
So, the real problem, I think, with the deck is that there's not a 2-mana Planeswalker that's worth playing right now. Right now. Now, there will probably eventually be one. There's just Tibble. That's all we're playing.
Well, there's Jace that turns into a Planeswalker.
But you can't use that with Oath of Nissa. And that is a decent one. And you can play that.
You can't use that without... Well, you can get him as a creature.
Yep.
So, it's not terrible. I don't know if... It would kind of be awkward to play green, blue, black, because I think you want to play the best Planeswalker, Liliana.
Why would it be awkward to play green, blue, black in Modern?
There's not very many crossover spells, so like a lot of Abzan cards that you play in the Abzan deck are Abzan colored, so they're a little more powerful for their cost. There's not too many crossover spells that you really get a super bonus for playing the multiple colors of mana.
It's just because Sultai's not played in Modern. You just don't know which ones they are. They're out there.
I mean, there's Sultai Charm. That one's pretty good.
There's better ones there. There's lots of good blue-black cards, and there's lots of good green-black cards, and there's probably good green-blue cards. I just can't think of them off the top of my head.
I can't think of any.
Right, but it's just because that deck hasn't been around. But I think Oath of Nissa may end up spawning a new version of a control deck in Modern that we haven't seen, because you could easily be in a situation where you are extra greedy with your planeswalkers and you're running 4 Oath of Nissas. Because what are you going to play that's better than on turn 1 other than a mana elf? Or removal?
I mean, drawing a card and then having your planeswalkers easier to cast is...
Imagine a Sultai deck that's running the 4 Oath of Nissas. It's running the black discard suite. It's running some blue cheap interactive stuff, but it's a tap-out Sultai deck that's just doing powerful things every turn.
Yeah, the problem with running the discard spells and stuff is you're actually lowering your chances to have creatures, lands, and planeswalkers, but you're not lowering it by much.
No, you have to get to somewhere like, even when you're at 30 non-creature spells, which is ridiculous because you wouldn't be there, but you're still at like...
30 non-creature land planeswalkers is what you mean, right?
Yeah. You're still like an 80...
Yeah,
88% chance of
hit.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to hit almost every time.
Yeah. So you probably want to keep your non-creature land planeswalker count to around, 15? That's pretty normal, I guess, as far as building your deck.
So the math that I saw for it said that 20 non-searchable spells puts you at 98%. Because you look at 3. It's very unlikely for you to miss completely. Mm-hmm. But anyway... Oath of Nissa, I know is standard playable. I mean,
it's standard playable. If nothing else, it draws you a card. I mean,
every time almost.
Yeah, and that's almost like playing less cards in your deck in standard. It's as close as you're going to get.
It's like you're playing a bad ponder that draw. It's like you're playing by bad ponder.
Yeah, would you play bad ponder? Let's say they go in the bottom. If they went in the graveyard, this would be great.
I mean, it's already great. You're playing a bad ponder.
A bad ponder in standard.
In green.
Is amazing.
Yes.
So.
Sylvan Advocate, I don't think is quite there. At 1 in the green for 2/3 vigilance. If you control 6 more lands, it gets +2, and the lands you control get +2/+2. But maybe there's some sort of like really slow deck. Like I'm just imagining a lot of the creature lands with +2/+2. Like imagine the double strike land that's now a 4/3. You know, that kind of stuff. I don't think it's there, but it's a powerful effect. Let's go over to the multicolored cards. Alright. So tell us about Ilea, Eternal Pilgrim, and if Black-White Soul Sisters is a thing in Modern with her.
So, we've talked about this a little bit before. It's 1 black and 1 white, Death Touch. Sacrifice another creature, gain life equal to its toughness. And sacrifice another creature, exile target non-land permanent, activate this ability only if you have 10 higher than your starting life total. So Soul Sisters is already good enough to see lots of play. There's another version of Soul Sisters that they call something else, right?
It's the white control version of it. But
yeah, and basically it just gains a ton of life repeatedly with, what's his name? We just looked at this. Anyway, so both of those decks don't have much problem getting 10 higher. Exile target non-land permanent for 3 and sack a creature is very good.
They have a lot of creatures. The thing to remember here is they've always had access to black, and they've splashed it before. Mm-hmm. And when they do splash black, they run a couple of discard spells, Inquisitions, that kind of stuff, to really tear up the combo decks.
Now you can tear up the hands and the in-play.
Right. So, like, this might be something that makes it so that Soul Sisters has a much more favorable matchup with Tron, where you play your Soul Sisters and you play Leah, and you kind of get there, and as soon as they drop their person, they have to answer something. And then you play an Leah, sacrifice something, move it, or they have to use their Karn to exile your 2/3 Death Touch, or you're going to exile their Karn so then you can swing with your 6/6 flyer. Mm-hmm. Like, it puts a lot more pressure in it. Standard, we'll see which way it goes or not. This kind of requires quite a bit of synergy to all come together. It may see play out of sideboards, but it's interesting to see a card that's basically only Modern playable. Here we go. Jory in Runediver, 1 blue-red. Merfolk Wizard, 2/3. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card. Now, standard. We talked about the deck for it. This is what makes that go. It plays with Surge cards, maybe without an enchantment. Maybe not. In standard, this card is playable. The interesting thing is, in Eternal formats, you can play a free card when you play this, and it draws you a card. And they have to kill it. Like, there's a lot of free cards in Modern that are playable.
There's a lot of free cards in Legacy.
And in both of those formats, you do need to answer a card like this. 3 mana is a decent bit, but the fact of the matter is, it's 3 mana, and then you have priority, and then you play your free spell. So I play 3 mana, Gataxian Probe. I have just replaced the card. Now, it is a grindy card. It is a slow card.
Yeah, and if Treasure Cruise wasn't banned, it would be like Index the first day it was legal.
Yeah.
Another reason that card's banned.
I think that, I don't know if it'll be blue-red or blue-red-black, like some sort of Grixis, but I think that this card will see some amount of play in Modern.
Well, this might just slide directly into the Grixis Delver deck.
Yeah.
Just a one of.
There might be a new format, or a new deck spawned that's essentially a variation of some mechanics of Storm-ish things with Surge, with some of the Surge cards. None of the Surge cards we looked at were super great.
No, they didn't print the card I had recommended, which was Brain Surge, which was a Brain Storm if you cast it for 1, or if you'd cast something before.
Or Surge Bolt, but anyway.
See.
But there is a potential that with the amount of free spells, Gataxian Probe, Gut Shot, some of the baubles, that this card could quickly get out of hand. You're drawing 2 cards each turn, those micro effects that add up. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but engine cards like this, anytime you have an ability to draw an extra card each turn, you're doing a lot. Could you see this being played in just Merfolk?
Merfolk is so weird because they don't really want to play another color. Because a lot of their spells are double blue.
Okay.
And they don't usually play more than 1 spell per turn.
Yeah.
Because they try to cheat them into play, so I don't know. I was just looking at the card beside that one up there that has support 2. It says up to 2 other target creatures, so that would be great in the 200 giant format. You probably talked about this before.
I did. I talked about all the stuff of that. Alright, so let's look at Reflector Mage. 1 blue, white, 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. That creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until your next turn. Let's talk about Standard. Is this good enough in Standard? It bounces a creature, which usually is not good enough, but it does prevent them from casting it for a whole turn. So let's say that, they don't have any other creatures in hand, you bounce their creature, and they draw a non-creature spell. They're blocked out a whole turn for that.
So this is strange because they haven't printed something exactly like this before. They usually say you can name a card and then that card can't be cast or something like that.
Right.
This one you're returning it and then that becomes the named card
for a turn.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It seems to buy you a lot. Would you be happy to play this card against aggressive card decks?
Oh yes, especially when you catch them early. So they have 2 of them or 4 of them in their deck, and maybe 2 in their hand, 4 in their deck, and so you bounce the one, and then you're not doing anything for at least a turn.
Right, or they're bigger spells in general. I think bigger spells. I think it's good in with the amount of tempo it buys in Standard. I've not seen it really anywhere else. If there's a landfall deck, then the Mina and Dina Wildborn will be in it, but I don't think that's happening. I think that does it for Multicolor. We'll do artifacts next. I actually don't think that there are any artifacts that are playable. You could say Captain's Claws because it makes 1/1's attack. I'm not convinced. There was none there. Let's look at the lands and then we'll come to the colorless cards last. Alright, so Corrupted Crossroads. Taps for colorless. Pay 1 life. Add 1 mana of any color for a devoid spell. I mean, that's obviously playable, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure. A deck would have to be made for this one.
Yeah, you're one. So. What about your? Do you play it in your eldrazi deck or no?
That's hard to say because
I think you don't.
Let's see. You've got 25 lands already. What do you want to take out for it?
I don't think you do.
Yeah.
So, Crumbling Vestige is a card I want to mention as it has the most potential to do really broken things. It comes into the battlefield and produces a mana
of any color,
and it enters the battlefield tapped. So if you have some sort of way to blink it, it keeps making mana, and if it untaps somehow, it makes 2 mana. I don't know what you're doing with it yet.
Oh, you're playing it in your
Amulet Bloom deck?
Amulet Bloom deck, right? I mean, is it good enough for Amulet Bloom?
No, they wouldn't run that one specifically because it's a combo, right? But there could be a way that combos.
Because their combo is to use the bounce land repeatedly, the same one.
Right.
So
let's look at the creature lands. Hissing Quagmire is the black-green one. 1 black-green. You get a 2/2 Death Touch.
Yeah, that seems a little weak.
It's a good defensive card.
Yeah.
Let's keep going down to the red one. It's the red-white creature land. 2 red-white. It's a 2/1 double strike. Now, Awaken's not played right now, but if there's a way to make this bigger...
By awakening it.
Or support, although I don't think you're going to support it, but if it gets bigger, if we have a way to consistently grow it somewhat, I think it could find a home in Standard.
Well, so if you put 3/1/1 counters on it, and then turn it into a creature, it becomes 10 damage.
It does?
That's pretty impressive, though. Turning it into a creature opens it up for removal that it's not usually open for, so...
I like it with Become Immense, because you can play Become Immense for 1, and then you can hit them for 16. I like it defensively, because it blocks a lot of the creatures. I think it's probably... I think the green-black creature land is the worst. Nah, maybe not. Death Touch is pretty good. They're all different and unique without being overly powerful like the other set.
Yeah.
I think they'll all see some Standard play. I don't know if any of them that we've covered so far will hit Modern. We have one left.
No, I mean, maybe just because they're in the right colors and Modern needs more manlands, but they won't be great.
Mirror Pool enters the battlefield taps for colorless. 2 and a colorless, sacrifice, copy an instant or sorcery you control, choose new targets. 4 and a colorless, sacrifice, put a token on the battlefield of any creature you control. I think this is great. I think it'll be played. And most importantly, I think it'll be played too much at first. You cannot play Mirror Pool in your 5-color deck or your 4-color deck. This is the kind of cards that we're getting off as the payoff. Mirror Pool is another creature or another spell. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. But you have to make a really your choice. Are you going to play Abzan Blue, or are you going to play lands that turn into creatures? This can copy legendary cards. So let's say that, Brad here is exiling my Ulamog. In response, make a copy, legend rule the other one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get any effects, but I mean, I still have a giant indestructible exile machine. So I think it's a very real card. Do you think that it is too slow for Modern?
It could theoretically be played in the Eldrazi Modern deck.
Or Tron.
But you still have to take out your good lands, basically, your good mana-fixing lands to play it. And so it might be a one-of, but I don't think it'll be played more than that or at all.
I think a one-of is a decent chance because you can search for them.
I mean, I would try it.
Alright, so let's go with more lands. I do like how Oath of the Gatewatch, which is a land-based block, has the lands to support it, by the way. There's so many cool lands here.
So, flavorfully, it's good.
Well, yeah, and a lot of these lands are going to... When people remember Zendikar, they will remember it for the lands and the Eldrazi, and that's it. And that's perfect. Runes of Oran Reef enters the battlefield taps for colorless. Tap to put a 1/1 counter on target colorless creature that enters the battlefield this turn. I don't think it's good enough for older formats because it enters the battlefield tapped, and that doesn't really do anything great. Mm-hmm. But what about Standard?
So Standard, once the colorless deck becomes a thing, if it does, which after rotation I bet it will, I think this could get played. It comes into play tapped, but you don't care too much about that in Standard because Standard's a little slower.
I agree.
And the 1/1 counter on each of your following creatures, right, is pretty important.
Yeah. Alright, so let's look at a card that is Modern playable, and maybe Legacy playable, and maybe Vintage playable. Seagate Wreckage. Tap static colorless. 2 and a colorless. Draw a card. Activate this ability if you have no cards in hand. So, we know that this card is playable in Standard for sure. I would put a heavy... I think it's playable in Modern in decks that don't have too greedy of a mana base. Right? Like say you're monocolor or something. Like, it's not too hard to set yourself up for this. You do need a way to make colorless mana.
Yeah.
So there is a cost to building this, but at the same time, like, this is a very powerful effect. Especially if it's only a one-of in your deck.
Yep. It's good. I wish it were just a little better. They could have probably pushed it further and it wouldn't have broken anything.
Possibly. Possibly.
Yeah.
It feels like a kind of card that I would be running in multiple modern decks and maybe some legacy decks already. Alright, let's come to the last most important land, and it's not waste. Wandering Fumarole. Enters the battlefield tapped, produces blue-red. 2 blue-red. It becomes a 1/4.
And you can switch its power and toughness willy-nilly. So it's a technical term.
Yes. This is standard playable. It blocks amazingly, attacks amazingly. I believe this is modern playable. There's a couple of elemental cards that already go infinite with this card.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can give it infinite power and toughness now. But also, this is the kind of card that I think something like Red, White, and Blue Control wants to play Celestial Colonnades and Wandering Fumaroles. It wants to...
and that's what we were hoping for when we got the green-red land, is that it would go in the decks with Celestial Colonnade.
Right, that it would be green-black for a 3/3 with... Or like, a 3/3 with Trample or a 3/1 Regenerate
or something is what I was thinking for the group.
Yeah, instead of being 3. But this is 4, but it is a strong effect. It blocks well, it attacks well. It's the kind of creature land that's going to put a lot of pressure on and take a lot of pressure off.
Yeah.
I think it's the best of the new creatures.
And it's the same cost, right, to Celestial Colonnade?
Celestial Colonnade costs 5.
It's 5.
Celestial Colonnade is 5 for 4/4 Flying Vigilance. It is by far the best creature land that has ever been printed and is quite a bit above everything else. That said, do you think that this can help bring about the resurgence of a Red, White, Blue control deck now that it can basically play less threats and more answers?
Well, so here's the thing is I don't think a control deck makes as much sense as just putting this in other decks.
What decks do you think it fits in modern?
So right now there's just the control deck that plays Celestial Colonnade, right? Isn't there another deck that plays it?
No.
Is there just the control deck?
It costs 5 to activate.
Okay, so maybe there isn't another deck for this one then.
Do you think you played Twin? Like that was a one-up?
It makes sense to play in Twin, but the problem is, at that much mana, why are you playing this card?
Right, that's what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking that Red, White, and Blue control, you're now running 6 or 7 creature lands that you're just winning with creature lands, and you're basically just running, 8 creature lands or 7 creature lands, and everything else is just an answer or a control element or a Snapcaster or a Lightning Bolt. Maybe you have the twin combo in it. There's multiple twin combos between Red, White, and Blue. Maybe you don't, but you don't have to commit anything except for answers. Now you have all these lands that win you the game. Your opponent can't just play one spell and lock you out, with the exception of Blood Moon. Right? There's not the way to just exile all of your lands, and etc., etc. But I'm not sure if it's there or not. Alright, let's go to the last one.
Right, you want to scroll down, I think, right?
Yeah. Colorless cards. So tell us about Eldrazi Mimic.
Eldrazi Mimic 2. When another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may exchange the Mimic's base power and toughness to that creature's power and toughness until end of turn.
So it attacks largely, quickly.
Yes. Until end of turn. Under your control. Okay. So you play it with a bunch of creatures that have high power and toughness but are slower, but just a little bit slower, and then you make it bigger while they have summoning sickness. Correct.
So I think in standard this could be okay, but let's look back at this Eldrazi deck where turn 1 we played this guy, and then turn 2 we play a 4/4, and now we're attacking for 4/4 on turn 2.
Now that is cool.
Right. So I do think this has potential to fit into that deck because it essentially costs 1. So people talked about Endbringer. I'm not up for that. Codes look the Great Distortion. 8 colorless. It's a 12/12. When you cast it, draw up to 7. It has Menace. Discard a card with converted mana cost X. Counter target creature with converted mana cost X. So we know this is going to be standard playable. Is it worth working its way to draw 7? Do you think draw 7 or exile 2 is better? Do you think that being able to just
draw 7 or exile 2,
and one of them finishes the game quickly, the other is a strong control element that you counter people's spells.
Well, this also finishes the game quickly. I mean, 12/12.
It's true.
So really, you probably play half and half.
So you think this will see some mild, moderate, some one of in Legacy, or not Legacy? Sorry, Modern.
It probably will. I mean, it's still not as good as taking another turn.
No, but
So,
but all those cost 5 more.
yeah.
Alright, so let's talk about an important card for Modern and a definite card for Standard. Matter Shaper, 2 colorless for a 3/2. When this creature dies, reveal the top card of your library. If it is a permanent that costs 3 or less, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand.
That's really good.
It is essentially... So if we think about Kitchen Finks, outside of the combo potential, as a 3/2 that draws us a 2/1 and gains us 4 life, it is a very, very good anti-aggro card. Matter Reshaper is more of the anti-control-ish version. It's getting us, again, 2 cards. At the worst, it's ramping us a land. And at its best, it's putting something like a Liliana the Veil into play.
That's true. That's true.
I feel like it's worse overall than Kitchen Finks because it's more random.
Well, also, since you have to pay colorless, no modern decks really play colorless except for that Eldrazi deck. They might incidentally have colorless in them. Oh, well, and Tron, but Tron's not going to play this.
The decks, if they want to play the colorless cards, can adjust their mana base slightly. Things like Yamavar, Coast, and Ardarkar Wastes do not cost much.
Even Affinity could theoretically play this, but wouldn't.
Yeah. So it's going to fit into more value decks, and if they want to make it happen, they can, and it does come with the cost. It's whether that colorless cost is worth it. I think this is a powerful card.
Yeah, if it said when you play it instead of when it dies, it'd be better.
That is true.
So, it's probably not going to make it.
Alright, let's talk about Spatial Contortion. 1 in a colorless. Target creature gets +3/-3. Standard. That's great. The black version of this doesn't see play in a
Last
modern.
Gasp.
Yeah, it doesn't see play in modern.
Yeah.
Would you play this in Affinity?
I don't think this one is worth playing in Infinity, though. There's another card here that's worth playing a little further down.
Alright, so let's talk about Reality Smasher. 4 for colorless, 5/5 trample haste. When it becomes the target of an opponent opponent controls, counter that spell unless the opponent discards a card. So it comes down pretty fast and furious, and you have to have cards just sitting in your hand that you're willing to get rid of. You have to get rid of 2 cards. And it's not like you're just sandbagging lands all the time, usually, to handle this this funky little dude.
And you can't choose to discard a card you don't have, right? So if it's
Correct.
the last card in your hand, you can't cast it and have it succeed.
It just counters it.
Yeah. So this one seems like another card for the Eldrazi deck.
Yep, and I think it's powerful modern as well.
Yeah, that's what I meant. For the Eldrazi modern deck.
Yeah, and the Matter Reshaper. Yep.
The fact that it has haste means a whole lot.
And trample,
And I mean, it's big enough to kill a
Goyf.
Well, most of the time a Goyf and usually a Siege Rhino.
Yeah,
I mean, always a Siege Rhino.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's very hard to make your Goyf bigger than a 5.
Especially if you can play it on the 3rd turn. Like, Trample Haste on the 3rd turn is pretty powerful.
Yep.
With a 5/5 body.
Speaking of, we've got the Thought Knot Seer. 3, colorless, 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent fills their hand. You exile a non-land card, and exile is extra powerful there.
Yep.
When it leaves play, target opponent draws a card. So it's a better version of the click effect. Misbind click.
You mean
Not misbind click.
yeah. You mean the one everybody just calls click because
Vendilion click.
Vendilion, yeah.
It's the better version of Vendilion click.
Yeah, and it only costs 1 more mana, but no blue. That's pretty cool.
Doesn't have flash, doesn't have flying, but what's really cool is, I mean, obviously this is going to be standard play. In the black-white Eldrazi deck, it costs 2. You play your thing that makes it reduced by 2, and you tap your land, and on turn 2, you now have a 4/4. You took the best answer to your 4/4, and now they're staring down.
Yeah, and they don't get that answer back either.
Oh, it's gone forever.
Like a lot of cards.
Yeah.
That put the card back in the
They
hand.
get another random
They get
card.
another random card like the click. And I think that is definitely going in the black-white Eldrazi deck for Modern. In fact, that may be the best card in it.
Alright, so Walker of the Wastes. Let's talk about the potential all Eldrazi, mainly Eldrazi deck. Let's say that you cast it on turn 5 off of 5 Wastes. And it's 4 in a colors for 4/4 trample. It gets +1/+1 for each card you have waste. In standard, let's say you have a 9/9 for 5 trample. Is that good enough?
9/9 for 5.
With trample.
With trample.
Every time you cast it.
The problem with that is right now, well, I don't know if there'll ever be actually, there may not be enough colorless cards that you want to play an almost colorless deck.
Let's count. Let's go down to the bottom, and then let's go back and count. because we're done. Warping Well, we talked a lot on the last time.
Oh, yes. I cannot wait to play this in my sideboard
Of Modern.
of Affinity. Modern.
The first ability kills about a third of the creatures you think matter, including all of the Splinter Twin combo cards, unless they start picking up the blue-green one. It kills Dark Confidant.
Yeah.
It kills Young Pyromancer. It kills
Both of which are
Snapcaster
hard
Mage.
decks to beat. The
Snapcaster
counter
Mage.
target sorcery stops your the spells that kill all artifacts, both of them, the red one and
Wrath
the
of
green
God
one.
effects. It stops.
Stops Wrath of God effects, which normally you don't lose to those.
What's the Valakut Molten Pinnacle deck? Scape
Oh,
Shift.
it also counters Scape Shift. And here's the best part about the card: in the mirror match, it's also good because it kills almost everything in Affinity too.
Yeah, we talked a lot about this.
Yeah, it also stops a lot of Tron spells, right? And it stops some of the Amulet Bloom cards, right?
Yes.
So.
It is an extremely potentially powerful card, not just for Modern, because when you go back to Vintage and Legacy, in Legacy, this is a lot of creatures have 1 toughness or 1 power.
Mm-hmm.
There are some sorceries you want to cast and all this stuff. But I think in Vintage is where it shines most, because when you go turn 1 land, Soul Ring, guess what you can cast? Warping Whale.
Oh.
When your opponent goes to play their Time Walk, their Yawgmoth's Will, 2 of the most important cards, Warping Whale.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to see multiples of in Vintage on that, but the fact of the matter is, these are the kind of abilities that are going to really push it over there. In Modern and in Standard, if your opponent plays a Planeswalker, and end of turn you Warping Will, their combat math is off by 1 now. They might have thought their Jace was going to live. Their Jace is not going to live. So those are all little important things that come together to make a very strong card. But let's count and see if there is a colorless deck. Let's talk about color standard.
In Standard.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, but these aren't the best.
7.
The best
There's only
cards.
7 too. You can't play mono colorless.
Yeah, so you won't be able to play straight colorless because the first set didn't add enough cards either, right?
No. Okay.
Now you could play a weak colorless deck, but it's just not worth it at that point.
No, it's close. but it's not
Now,
there.
in Standard though, you still get the 4 cards that tap for 2 for Eldrazi's, right? So you could
No.
theoretically rent, huh?
No, those are in Modern. That's from the first Rise.
No. They don't make Eldrazi's cost 2 less. They tap for 2 mana to play Eldrazi spells.
That's
right?
not legal.
Am I thinking of?
Eldrazi Temples. Yeah.
Oh, Eldrazi Temple and the other Eldrazi card are both too
Yeah.
old. Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
I thought they had printed a new one that did that.
They did.
Oh,
It
never
costs
mind.
multiple mana. All right, guys.
Never mind.
That's where we're at right here. If you guys have any thoughts, remember you can reach us, mobiuspick@gmail.com. We'll be happy to respond to you guys there. A lot of new cards are coming out. This set looks to have a high amount of cards going into Modern. A lot of it is going to go into a couple of colorless decks for the most part. That
Both
Eldrazi,
impressive.
yeah, the Eldrazi
Yeah,
deck.
this deck is the one I'm most excited about.
It's gonna. Let's just look at the cards they're gonna cut. Ulamog. You probably don't have to play it anymore. You can if you still want to. You have another option. Oblivion Slower and Blight Herder. Maybe you want to keep playing them for the kind of exile effects, but the fact that you have 4 mana options that are much stronger. Wasteland Strangler. Maybe you want to keep playing it. Maybe not. There's 2 and 4 mana, just colorless cards you can play for 1 or 2 mana that are very powerful. Which means you might end up cutting places like Lingering Souls and these other generically powerful black-white cards might become aggressively strong colorless cards. You might just leave black-white. You might be in 2 completely different colors.
Yeah, you might be able to cut white and go. No, you probably want to keep the paths.
You might end up in a deck that runs 4 Eye of Ugins, 4 Eldrazi Temples, and really is all in on things like Eldrazi Mimic.
You might be able to do that. It's
Matter
possible.
Reshaper.
Now, you probably also want to put some red in there for the new red cards.
Maybe.
It's going to be a difficult deck to build.
But the fact of the matter is, you have 2 lands that produce 2 mana for all of these creatures, and these are some terrifying, right? I mean, turn
that
2,
is powerful.
turn 2, Thought Not Seer. Turn 2, look at my 4/4. It took your best card. You are going to die. I don't think that there's a better. I can't think of a better turn 2 play than turn 2 Thought Not Seer as far as creatures go.
Aside from the decks that empty their entire hand on the first and second turn.
But there's no single card.
There's no single card, though. So there's a very good card in that Jace is an excellent 2-mana card.
Yeah.
That you can play on the second turn. But there's no 4-mana card you can play in Modern except for this one.
Makes it the best.
Yeah. Not on the second turn. There's not... I mean, there's a 3-mana card you can play for 1 mana that gives -5/-5, and it costs you 4 life to do it. And you can do that on the first or second turn. That's about it. Like, all the other Phyrexian spells, they don't get that cheap.
Nope.
So...
Alright, well, we're going to end it on Thought-Knots here, guys. Remember, we are uploading right now our limited reviews. I spent several hours today covering each one for...
It's amazing he can talk at all.
It's true. I covered it for Draft, for Sealed, and for 2